Okay, everybody. Welcome to our first session this afternoon. This is a really wonderful session. We're delighted to have Dr. William Hoover and also Dr. Thomas Reimer together for this session. This is a session on blended learning. And for those of you who may not be sure what that is, they're going to tell you. You're not going to hear it from me. They're going to tell you because they're the pros. And in particular, Dr. Bill Hoover. You all know Dr. Thomas Reimer. I mean, we know him, so I don't have to give him that much of an introduction, okay? Although you can bow. There we go. Yeah, Reimer. Oh, thank you. And on the other hand, Dr. Hoover, we do want to appropriately introduce a little bit because Dr. Hoover is a doctor of medicine, which means you do not come up to him afterwards and give him symptoms. You do not come up to him and ask to take pressure readings or any of that stuff. No. You're going to ask him about how to put together an online course, maybe a medical assistant, little programs here and there. Within that program, you'll hear a lot of good stuff. But Dr. Hoover is a professor at Bunker Hill College in Massachusetts, and he has been one of the true pioneers in distance education, not only in Massachusetts, but throughout the nation, and has a worldwide reputation for the work that he has done in the pioneering programs that he has developed. One of the reasons that he is here is that he's also able to break it down as an educator, which he is, into the nuts and bolts components, the simple stuff, to help us to understand what do we have to do to make it work? How do we put it together? And then Thomas is going to be here towards the latter part of the session to lay out, okay, now that you hear how to do it, here's what we allow, and here's the way we put it together in New York so that you can implement the stuff that Dr. Hoover is referring to and putting together. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't thank McGraw-Hill Higher Education and Michelle Lopain and Kimberly Woods, she's here as well, Kimberly, because without their sponsorship of Dr. Hoover being here with us, we wouldn't be able to make this program happen today. So we thank McGraw-Hill very much for this. And without any further ado, Dr. Hoover, I think you're beginning, so take it away.
This one, I think there's a way to turn it off, maybe not. Okay, let's see, is that working in the back still? Okay, great. So before we actually get into the actual presentation, what I'd like to do is to tell you a little bit about the background of hybrid and online learning. About 7 years ago, I saw that there was going to be a shift, meaning a movement towards online, and it was sort of just a little knock on the door. And so I said, oh, I want to be out in front with this, and I also want to make sure that students that are going to be taking these hybrid or online courses definitely are going to be learning. I think, you know, especially our students, they're unique, aren't they? Are our students 18, average 18 years old, fresh out of school, or do we have students that are non-traditional, that may be coming back to school? We have very unique population. So when we try to reach those students, we want to make sure that we give them the types of tools that they're actually going to learn. And that was very, very important with me. So I started doing research 7 years ago, and I started introducing different types of tools to students to see if these tools actually worked. We had student and faculty focus groups where we allowed for feedback, and we wanted to know, was this tool helpful? And if it was, how? And if it wasn't, why wasn't it? Was there something we could do to make this tool better? And we started out with just simple, animations. And we started working with passive learning activities, and then we started to move towards active learning activities where we wanted the students, they said it was very important to them to be able to do kinesthetic activities while they were trying to learn. Of course, they're visual learners. How many of you know that the student that graduated high school this past year is younger than the internet? Did you know that? That's a very powerful statistic because it tells us that our students have been connected to the internet, to the World Wide Web, through social media for a long, long time. And so it was frustrating for me to hear other instructors say, you know, these students today are different. They don't study. They don't want to learn. They don't, and that's all I heard. And I said, you know what? Maybe it's because us old dogs need to learn some new tricks. Meaning the way that they learn is a lot different than the way that we learned. And so now we're going to sort of progress into the presentation, and I think you're going to see that the way students are capable of learning in an online environment doesn't need to be a negative. It doesn't need to be a hush-hush. It doesn't need to be something that we say, oh boy, we've got this hybrid program that we're about ready to start, and boy, I don't know if these students are going to learn anything. No, we want to make sure that we can prove that they are going to learn something. So, I titled this sort of like a finders keepers because I care so much about my students. I'm very passionate about my students, and I do not want to lose even one student. It bothers me. If a student drops out of my class, the first thing I do is call them and find out why. I want to know exactly why they dropped out. And so what we're going to find today with digital tools, we're going to be able to find those students and keep them or get them back whenever they're ready. So I think this particular statement speaks to all of us. We know that in any work environment today, students have to have a digital prowess. They have to be able to use digital tools. They have to be able to perform with digital tools. I mean, even all electronic medical records now, even doctors like me who can't write very well don't have an excuse because we have to type, right? We can't just scribble our names. So we have to prepare these students. And so what can technology and education do for us? You know, what is its purpose? You know, and I think lots of times whenever I've interviewed faculty members, you know, they always come up with, you know, visual ideas, and they show animations and videos, and they talk about it being a dynamic way of presenting information. But, you know, besides that, we can help diagnose and address individual students' needs, okay? Up until now, we would teach in a classroom and have 25, 50 students, and we had no idea at any given point in time how any of those students were doing. We would wait until after our first major assessment, and then we lost them because they didn't perform well, and they just didn't come back. But now, we can do ongoing assessments of students' mastery. Hear that? Ongoing. Meaning that we can see from day to day to day how well they are mastering the information. Have you ever been able to do that before in a classroom? Yeah? So you knew how every single student was doing every single day? Really? That's pretty impressive. We're going to talk afterwards. That's a very difficult thing to do. Trying to get an idea of where our students stand individually and whether or not they're not just memorizing terms but are able to apply that knowledge is very, very important to us, and we can do that with digital tools. We can provide early intervention, which I think is very important using these digital tools. And so I think whenever we talk about hybrid courses or web-enhanced courses, we have to understand that getting to these students early, understanding where their strengths and weaknesses are, and how to prepare them better is very, very important. The only way we can do that is with digital media. We can provide an engaging and adaptive experience. Anybody want to venture a guess of what adaptive means? I mean, it's a pretty big buzzword out there in higher education right now. Anybody want to guess? Adaptive? Yep. Change in real time. So we sort of get to see things evolving or changing in real time. Yes, that's very good. I like to think of it sort of as an educator. I like to think of things using illustrations. How many of you have either an app or a GPS? Okay. So if you're the typical male driver, right, you know that if you don't have that app on and she says, honey, I think we were supposed to turn left. I know where I'm going. Well, when I say adaptive, it's very much like a GPS. when a student starts to go down the wrong path, if they're not learning something the way that they should and they're not able to apply it, the GPS brings them right back onto their learning path. And I'm going to show you a couple of tools today that will help keep those students on that same path all of the time because of the way the digital tool was designed. Okay? Another big thing that you want to make sure that you do is to promote active learning in the hybrid environment. Is anyone promoting active learning in a hybrid environment or online environment now? Okay, a few of you, good. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways that we can engage those students and then require them as an assignment to be able to prove that they are in an active environment. And second, we need to provide them real-time feedback. I don't know if any of you have heard of a MOOC, a massive open online course. That's another, within the last couple of years, Coursera, Udacity, these companies have been offering courses where 15,000 to 50,000 people are signing up. Now, they don't have a good completion rate. However, those who do complete, one of the biggest things that they said they loved was the real-time feedback, meaning hearing about, am I doing well, am I not doing well? Did I get this right, did I get this wrong? Before they get to the end of an entire chapter and then find out, oh geez, 35, 45, 55% of that, I didn't know what I was doing, but now I've got to move on to chapter 2. So these students need to have real-time feedback as they are completing their assignments, if they're being done online. And then we can bring some continuity and stability to our programs. At Bunker Hill, we launched a program about 5 years ago, and we started to offer hybrid courses. And of course, like many of you, we were scared, right? What is this hybrid course? What is this going to entail? And more than anything, we wanted to make sure that we were covering the learning outcomes, and we mapped it out very nicely. But then when we had to actually implement the tools that were going to tell us whether or not those learning outcomes were being met, we were sort of at a loss. There wasn't a lot developed back then. There wasn't a lot to be able to verify that students were participating. How many of you have discussion boards that you may use online at all? Okay, again, a couple of you. So the bad thing about discussion boards is that they're a thread. And the thread is just a matter of anyone can just put anything they want into that thread at any point in time, and then according to the rubric, they're going to get points for it. So what we wanted to do was to change that. We wanted to build in features that we knew were going to be trackable, right? We wanted to be able to have a good idea, and we wanted the data to be reliable. So when we look at a couple of the reports, you're going to get to see exactly how powerful they are. So how many of you have heard this term, flipped classroom? Okay? Wow, only 3 people have heard the term flipped classroom. Really? You guys are like my students. So a flipped classroom. Basically, in a digital sense, what we're trying to say is we have finally figured out a way to get the students to do what they're supposed to do before they come to class. Right? Now imagine this. For the past 50 years, instructors all over the country have been saying in their syllabus, week 1, we're going to cover chapter 1. Please read chapter 1 and part of chapter 2 and do this little assignment before you come to class. And how many students have done it? So, where there are no laws, there are no criminals. Until now, right? Now we have the ability to require these things to be done before they come to class. So as a best practice, the assignments that you are going to give in terms of preparation, you want a level playing field so that whenever the students all come in, they can all at least talk the same language whenever they arrive. And then you'll find that instead of talking about definitions of terms, you're talking about the practical application of those terms. Okay? So what is this hybrid? What is it all about? What can we do? Well, like I said, we can actually give the lecture. I give my lectures to my students before they ever come to class. We don't do lectures in class. To me, that's a big waste of time. I mean, I'm just a talking head. in the front of the classroom and they sit and they listen and they write, do you realize that you can only at the very best copy down accurately 50 to 60% of what a person is saying during a lecture? So that's ridiculous. So I give them the lectures before class. They do that outside of the classroom, so that whenever they do come, we're reversing it. Now we can start to do the homework in the class. And when you see some of these homework exercises, man, they're really cool. They're going to blow your hair back. Okay. So again, work is done before they come to class. We can focus on that active learning. We can talk about the application of materials. And we use instructors as coaches and advisors instead of lecturers. And then the students will be reviewing this content for the second time. So every time you hear someone's name, you're more likely to remember it. So it's repetitiveness that will actually get them to the point. So to give you an example of what happened, I did a blood typing activity. I gave them the Nobel Prize winning activity where the students had to interact with an accident. And there were several patients that were brought in, and they had to figure out all of the blood types. Well, whenever we did that in class and we explained that, of course, if I had not flipped my classroom, when they came in the past, I would say, this is an antigen, this is an antibody, and I would talk about all of the terms. And we never got to actually do a simulated blood typing activity. And then I had a student who came in and said, Dr. Hoover, you're never going to believe this. I was in the hospital this past week, and I noticed the type of blood that the person had, and she was giving birth to a baby, and long story short, recognized that the mother had Rh factor, let the nurses know, and that person was given RhoGAM. Okay? So I can say that if I had not assigned activities or work at home before they ever came to class, I never could have done that type of an activity. So again, as I mentioned earlier, I said one of the big things that we can do is we can catch those students early. We can catch those students and we can use concept application. I think a lot of our students, whenever they leave us, they have a lot of knowledge running around inside of their head, but they don't know how to link that knowledge so that they can apply it whenever they get into the real world. So, by using these digital tools, we have ourselves basically a fish finder. And we're able to reach out and find all of those fish that could be lost. And if you've ever fished without a fish finder, you could spend hours, right, catching nothing, right? And so that's why I was told my wife before I got one, I said, that's why I call it fishing. Otherwise, you'd call it catching. But if we don't use these tools and we can't monitor and we can't track and we can't follow, then we're going to be sitting like this over top of just one fish, and we may not even catch that one, okay? So, one of the nice things about using these tools is that we can track everything based on our learning outcomes. How many of you have accrediting bodies that you have to answer to or align curricula to? All right, finally I'm getting more hands. I'm asking the right questions now. So whenever these bodies are going to ask you, are you teaching the learning outcomes? Yes. Are you measuring how your students are doing? Yes. Are you remediating students whenever they're not meeting those learning outcomes? Yes, but how do you provide the proof? Okay. The great thing about these tools is that everything is tagged. Everything is tagged. It's tagged for degree of difficulty. It's tagged for chapter, subject, degree, Bloom's levels of understanding. Okay. It's tagged for everything. So that whenever you want to generate a report, all you have to do is simply check off the filters and you get exactly what you're looking for. And this is an example of what it would look like. You see that I've checked off the boxes for learning outcomes. And we get it. As I said, we would have a very quick glance at seeing what student engagement and whether or not we can find these students. And here is the data that we get. Okay. So I'm showing you the back end first so that you can see the value of what I'm about to show you on the front end. Okay. So I can see right here that these 6 or 7 students are at risk because as a heat map it shows that they're in trouble. But are our students always in trouble because they're not good at academics? Or do they have issues maybe at home? Maybe they have children, maybe they have a couple of jobs that they're working. So we can find out exactly what the purpose or the reason is for their struggles. However, if we don't use these digital tools, and I encourage I'm in charge of over 60 adjunct instructors. And I encourage them and I require them to use digital tools, even for web enhancement, just so that the students get used to it, so that they can easily migrate from one course to the next. Because it is a shock whenever students come in to take a hybrid course for the first time. They have no idea what to expect. They don't know what's to be expected of them. And so I strongly encourage you that if you're going to start offering hybrid courses, that you start with Web Enhanced first. And you get that right first. Okay? Because if you don't, you're going to have lots of problems with hybrid. But if you do, the great thing is that students will naturally progress, and so will your instructors. If they're required to Web Enhance the first year that they teach, great. They'll slowly wade into those digital waters, okay? But they've got to use it. They've got to use it, and we'll show you how to effectively do that. So in hybrid, we say some of the big things that we want to, some of the barriers that we want to pull away are accessibility. You know, do these students have access? You know, are they able to get online? Do they have Wi-Fi programs? Do they have devices that will allow them to access? Okay, so that requires a lot of work on your part to make sure that you do a digital audit and that you make sure that you have in place the tools that will make it possible for your students to do this. But one thing you shouldn't do is to fear digital. Do not fear it. Okay, it will do exactly what you want it to do and nothing more and nothing less. So do not bite off more than you can chew, though. Okay, that's why I said it might be a good idea to start with web enhancement and to master that first. Okay. So if we want to make this work for our students, we give them sort of a self-paced environment with the tools that we give them. Of course, we have due dates by which it must be complete, but you'll see with the adaptive tool I'm going to show you that they can work at their own pace and at their own level, okay, at their own level. And then making it work for you and your instructors. I always ask my instructors, if you had to eat an elephant, how would you do it? One bite at a time. And so whenever you roll out technology on your campuses, you should really make sure that you do each little piece very, very well before you move on to something else. And whenever I show you the design of my course in a few minutes, you're going to see how I layer or tier the assignments. I started with the Web Enhanced and I tiered those assignments until eventually the students and myself was strong enough to be able to handle that, and then we migrated into a hybrid environment. Okay? Because we really want to do this. If we're in a hybrid environment, we want to make the best face-to-face time we possibly can, because students live for that. Has anyone in here taught in a hybrid environment yet? No one? Okay, 1, 2. Those students feel like they're on an island somewhere whenever they are not with you. They're sort of this safety net that you provide. So whenever they come in, if you have once a week meetings or two times a week meetings, they're going to be looking for you. So what we want to do with these types of products that I'm going to show you, you want to be able to give them the real-time feedback that engages them. Okay? So let's jump out of here and let's take a look at some of this live so that you can see it in action. So I'm going to start with my anatomy class so that you can see, or physiology class, And so right here from the home page, we start out with what we would consider Connect. Connect is very similar to a learning management system on some level. And this is sort of like the one-stop shop, which means if you want to provide lectures, there's a lecture capture here, a recorder that you can keep everything here. One thing you want to make sure you do in hybrid is to make sure that your students don't have to go to multiple sites with multiple user IDs and multiple passwords. Even if they have the same user ID and password, going to multiple sites is going to be a problem because they can't track it. You want to make sure that you keep everything in the same place, and that's what Connect is. Connect is that shell that allows you to pull everything into the same place. Okay? So here I could produce my lectures if I wanted to. I produce all of my assignments. And one thing that I think is very, very powerful is if you look here, oops, that one's not in. That's the wrong course. One moment. Where's my mouse? There it is. You'll see that I put at the very top a quick start guide. And the quick start guide is basically capturing how to do each of the things that my students are going to be required to do. I put those right at the very beginning so that the students will know exactly. If I say you're going to do an adaptive assignment, then I do an exercise for practice and I record it and then I put it into the quick start guide so that the students can watch it 24/7. You want to make sure that they have access and that they know exactly what's going to be expected of them. Okay? Because what we want to do is we want to pull the technology away and let the teaching begin. Okay, so if we don't create these types of activities so that our students know exactly, student learn smart reports. If you're going to expect them to use the reports to help them help themselves, I always tell my students that the best helping hand is at the end of your own wrist. And then I show them how to use that helping hand at the end of their own wrist. But if I don't put these types of guides for them at the very beginning of my course, then when they get down to the actual assignments, they will have no idea what's to be expected of them. Now, just like you may be afraid of technology, they're not really afraid of technology, but what they're afraid of is losing points. They're afraid of not performing well enough in the assignment to be able to get credit for it. So we really need to make sure that we educate our user on exactly what's going to be expected of them in this hybrid environment. So I would say that's probably one of the best practices you can do is to make sure that you have these how-to videos right at the very beginning of the course. Okay? And then whenever they come in, they're going to have an interactive, well, let's see, let's give you one that's a little more user-friendly. Here we go. Again, this is sort of mundane, but it's very, very important because a student needs to know what's going to be expected from them. Every single thing that you want to be in that assignment needs to be spelled out. And I think that Dr. Reimer can back me up here and say that whenever you give specific instructions to the students about what's to be expected of them, what are the penalties, what are the due dates, what are the types, how many attempts they have, all of this stuff needs to be listed at the very beginning. So whenever they access it, they know what's to be expected of them. Because again, they're on an island for a small period of time where they're doing this stuff by themselves. So you need to make sure that that's available and well explained. Now this is one of the activities that I was mentioning where it requires the student to engage with the screen. It requires them to interact with content. And we can do anything from a, let's say like in a medical assistant environment, we can give them a clinical application where we can say, you know, here is a person who's coming in for a physical. What are the things that are important? And then they go through a series of activities. And so we can start this activity and see what these are. Let's see if it's... Let's see if that... We'll play it and see if it's too loud.
Ventricular contraction causes the atrioventricular valves to close, which signals the beginning of ventricular systole. The semilunar valves were closed.
Now, what I want to show you is that these have gated activities in them, okay? So this is what I mean about giving them interactive assignments. They don't just sit there and watch a video, and then at the very end, you give them 5 questions. Right here, they're watching it live. They can rewind it if they want to, but they can't go on until they do this gated question, okay? So again, what we're trying to do is we're trying to simulate as closely as we can with these activities what they would be getting in a face-to-face environment. So you want to make sure that you engage your students with these types of activities. And then as they would, you know, choose their answers and go through.
During the previous diastole, and remain closed during this period. Continued contraction increases pressure in the ventricles above the pressure in the aorta and pulmonary trunk, causing the semilunar valves to open. When the ventricles relax.
So that's one example of the type of assignment that we would give. And whenever we get to others, we'll see that there are simple drag and drop features, but like here. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to find out if the student can take, this is what we build a lot of neuroscience into the activities. We're taking words that are abstract. You mentioned lymphocyte to a student, no idea. But then whenever you start to show them pictures, and they have to associate what these lymphocytes look at, maybe they're going to work in a lab someday, right? Maybe they're going to do white blood cell counts someday. They've got to be able to link the abstract with the concrete. And so that's what these activities do, is that they require the student to be able to use the screen to be able to link these types of things. And you'll notice that I'm hovering over top of here. So we're giving, again, this is assistance and real-time feedback to the student. The student says, wait a minute, I don't recognize this structure. So what do? Inside of the program, the digital authors who have built this, I'm one of them, is we put a description or a definition so that we can kind of encourage them to remember what these structures are and what they do. So now we're not only taking structure, we're also linking function. We're putting those two things together, and then with a visualization. And the research that we've done has shown that whenever the student sees the actual written question on a test, the student will say that that picture comes to their mind. Oh yeah, lymphocyte, that was the little cell that was filled up with a big nucleus. And then they know right away. So you can see that even, well, let me ask you this. How many students do you think that come into our programs are so confident that they say, you know what, there's 3 semesters that I need to do or 3 10-week sessions that I need to do, and I can guarantee that I'm going to pass and I'm going to... No, very few feel that way. Very few are coming into the classroom for the first time in their life and they're saying to themselves, boy, my mom and dad didn't go to school. None of my aunts and uncles went to school. I didn't go to a good school, nor did I really try very hard, but I really want to do something better for my kids someday. So I'm going to give this school thing a try. Well, whenever they come in the backs of their minds, they're already thinking that I might not be good enough. And if they think that, we have to try to find a way to change that perception. And what do we do? We give them real-time feedback so that whenever they are moving these things into place, and they put them in the right or the wrong place, which they should be allowed to do, they can say, oh geez, how am I doing so far? Do I want to submit all 30-some questions to my teacher to be graded and not know how well I'm doing? Because if I missed a lot of them, I'm going to look stupid.
That's the way they feel, and that's the way they've expressed it to me. And so we built in a feature called Check My Work. Now you'll notice that I only give them 2 Check My Works, right? Only 2, which means that if they are not doing well, they use the second one, it's gone. So if they don't do well on the second one, I give them a remediation tool, which is active learning, to be able to use the textbook. Now, isn't that where we want the students to be right from the very beginning? Reading that textbook. So the students, they'll say, oh, what do you mean I only get 2 tries? So it will actually pre-grade this for them and let them know how well they're doing so far. And again, for a student who needs their confidence built, great. I've got 4 for 4, I'm doing really well. So you give them the real-time support and feedback that encourages them to stay in the program, to stay in the assignment, to complete the assignment. But what if they weren't doing really well? What if I move these? Oops, I can't use that. So let me cancel. What if I move these in other places and I wasn't doing so well? I want to show you what that student will get. So the student checks it for the second time, and they say, oh man, I'm still only at 50%. So student knows they don't have any Check My Works left. So what do? Well, what we've provided in this program is the ability for the student to come down here at the bottom and choose the ebook. And whenever they click on that ebook, it's going to take them to the section of the chapter. Not the exact page, it's not going to highlight the exact paragraph, but it takes them to the section so that now they can skim through that section, find the information that they're looking for and say, yes, that's what I should have studied in the first place. Okay? Now, you take that one step further, and if the student is really struggling, we have a very, very special feature in this type of an ebook where if they said, I'm going to highlight or I'm going to put in blue everything that I don't know. Okay? And let's say they didn't know this piece of information from the homework and they want to save that in blue. And another piece of information they didn't know. Or, for me, I give them a study guide. I give them a study guide to prepare before they come for the test. And whenever they do, I require them to do this. And so all of this information that they've just stored is in something called My Notebook. And this My Notebook can then be selected and then printed. Which means now, as an active learning device, the students have now been able to find out what they don't know, right? They've searched it in the book, they've collected that information, and now they have printed a review sheet so that they can be better prepared for whenever they take the big exam. See, so if we recap real quick, what did these interactive homework assignments really accomplish? Number 1, we made sure that the students were interacting with content before they ever came to class. Number 2, we provided them real-time feedback so that they knew if they were doing well or not so well. But we didn't throw them to the dogs, because if they weren't doing well, we gave them the ability to use the ebook, to go back into the ebook, find the information that they were struggling with, record it, collect it, and then review it for their tests. Okay? So this is the type of thing that you want to make sure that if you're offering a hybrid course, you want to make sure that your students have access to these types of tools, because if they don't, your students will not succeed, or they will not have a good chance at succeeding, I should say. So the second tool that I wanted to show you was what we would consider to be our adaptive product. Okay? Our adaptive product. And I provide this for students because I explain all of this to the students. I say, you are about to use a tool, but I want you to understand how to use it, why you should be using it, and how it's supposed to help you. So again, adaptive. A little background about adaptive. Adaptive teaching tools were built on a mind map, a pedagogical mind map, which means that you need to learn this before you learn this, and you need to learn this before you learn this. And you need to learn it at a certain level of understanding. So how many of you are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? Okay, so memorization. But does memorization mean you can do anything with that information? No. Second of all, you have to be able to understand it. But even if you understand it, it doesn't mean you can apply it. So basically what we've built in here are 3 levels of Bloom's. We have the memorization, which is the first step in learning, and then understanding it, and then how do we apply it? So to give you an example of what that is, I tell my students to learn about diffusion, the movement of a substance from an area of high concentration to low concentration. So if I was wearing a very offensive cologne, you would smell it first, she would smell it second, and it would slowly permeate through the back. That's just a definition, right? And if that's all we could do, with that, then that student wouldn't be helped. But if we were able to give them the ability to then understand it and say, hey, if someone has difficulty breathing, we can give them 100% oxygen versus the regular oxygen that's in the room. Now they understand it. But then we take it one step further and ask them to apply it. And whenever they apply it, that's whenever we say that they are able to implement. And that would be a situation where we would say, okay, someone has, oops,
It's possible to read a
our
book
coach
with
is on.
CFA.
So we say that that person would then be able to say, well, what if someone had emphysema? Then they would have to know that they could use the information that they had from their understanding and give that person oxygen if they needed it. So in this adaptive product, all of the activities are built that way. So first, they would read the information chapter by chapter, and then they would practice it. And after they read it and wanted to practice it, then we would put them in an environment where they would be asked questions. And the questions that they would be asked would require us to know their perception of their knowledge first. Because students will typically say, I know this, but then whenever they answer it, they get it wrong. And so their perception doesn't match reality. But we also give them, again, that real-time feedback, that assistance that they need, like a personal tutor. Hey, you don't know this? Well, you can use the textbook. The textbook is available to you. So again, we're putting tools at the fingertips of the students so that they don't feel like they're on their own with just a textbook and a piece of paper and taking down notes. So then they could answer these questions. And again, these questions are going to be served up based on how successful they are at the entry-level questions, and if they master those, they're brought up to the next level of questions, and if they answer those, they're brought up to the next level of questions. So they're progressively led through that content to the point where they felt comfortable with it from a memorization standpoint, from an understanding standpoint, and then to an application standpoint. So, but again, we wanted to be able to give them the real-time feedback, and then all of this content is going to be recalled in the form of data reports. And I think Dr. Reimer here.
Well, this was an excellent presentation. I have been going through the 4 courses that were sent by McGraw-Hill, and I think that these are very workable. So these are very workable modules for blended learning, and so I'm going to quickly talk about how would you submit it to BPSS if you choose to use them. Now, if you have, for example, a medical assistant curriculum that can be mostly classroom, but then these modules can be blended, so it can be integrated. You would submit it just as any other type of curriculum using our form and soon our electronic submission, and you would fill out the same details. The units would still be described as now, but the blended units would have a parenthesis with the words blended. So that way, everybody who looks at the curriculum can quickly see that this is supposed to be a blended unit. In 21A, you would then describe in detail what the blended means. I mean, how often do the students meet in the classroom, and what's the expectation about the pre-classroom work? I think that this system has a very good angle in that the students do the pre-work and then in the classroom can actually apply that knowledge instead of the homework being more of a post-classroom validation, but that in a way has a problem because you grade the homework, but the rest of the class already has forgotten about it because we're already in the next chapter. So by doing it as a pre-work, it actually will encourage the students to study. So 21A is where you put all the details about what makes it blended. In item 20, the equipment, I would need some additional details. What platform are you using? Because there are, of course, also other modules around. So which platform is it? I need a copy of your contract with whoever is running your course. I need to make sure that there is a mirror server and that that mirror server is not exactly 500 yards away from your main server. Because if, and we have again a Hurricane Sandy and everything happens to be in CNYSCS, well, then everything is wet. So you want to have the mirror server at least in the mountains of New Jersey. So, I mean, these are all technical questions that I need to know about before I can approve it. Because once you're up and running and there's a problem, it's a bit too late. So that's basically what I would expect from a blended learning course. It's not going to be that different from a regular classroom course that already integrates electronic material. It's just that the students will do the pre-work before. So instead of being in class 4 times a week, they will be in class once a week, and the pre-work is actually classroom work as well. Now, because the pre-work happens to be in the student's home, it's going to be a bit tricky to assign the right number of instructional contact hours, which, as you know, BPSS schools need to have. These hours, we will discuss them when you submit it. If they sound realistic, considering the amount of work, and here I will draw upon my expertise, having taught for Empire State College for close to 20 years, but I resigned last year after my promotion, having already so much work. But, and I remember the good old days when there was no online classes. When I received a stack of student essays, was able to sit out in my beautiful backyard with a cigar and a mug of coffee and then read everything at leisure and then call the student back and discuss the assignment with them. Those were the days. But now everything is online. So how many hours will be assigned to a unit, which happens 80% in the student's home? Some students might be able to use just 1 hour to finish. Others will use 20. So we'll have to find a just compromise. That is especially important if you are getting federal financial aid. There will be no inflation of these hours just to get across the magical threshold of 600 hours. And also, BPSS approval is really only about the subject matter for the curriculum. You need to check with your accreditor and with your funders if they are okay with the blended learning format. And you shouldn't ask me because I'm not HESC and I'm not US DOE. So whatever opinion I give is just an opinion. I can only say things about BPSS and the curriculum. I cannot even say anything about agents because that's not my bailiwick. And when it comes to whether will this pass a TAP audit, will this be okay with US DOE, I do not know that. Ask the people whose opinion matters there. So, so basically, I think that this blended learning will be an excellent opportunity for schools to make it a bit easier for students to learn certain subjects such as medical terminology, anatomy and physiology, law and ethics, not necessarily phlebotomy, that's not yet going to work. But we will definitely, so in a way, this is the wave of the future. And I look forward to submissions. Now, a few things you need to know, though. This course here that was presented does not include teachers provided by the vendor. There are other courses where you can also have a mentor that will teach it for you. This will not work. As I explained last year, the operating principle here is you have to earn your bread by the sweat of your brow. If you get the tuition, you have to do the work. So it's your teacher who is going to teach this, your teacher who is going to get the phone calls, your teacher whose email is going to be on the course. And if the vendor, like Ed2Go, provides a mentor that goes with it, I do not care. That's not a BPSS licensed teacher. Your students should not see that person as their teacher. Only your teacher can teach. Only your teacher can grade. Only your teacher can take attendance and can give a final grade. So that's a big thing, because there are schools who sometimes contact me and say, we just want the students to sign the enrollment agreement, but then all the teaching is actually done through our contract with that vendor, and that's not going to fly. And now, I kind of like explained all of this also last year. So, and all of you should have that 8-page document about the conditions that BPSS sets for online learning. This also applies, of course, to blended learning as well, since that's only a variant of online learning. And so I don't want to repeat myself. However, I will take questions now, and they can repeat things that were asked last year. Try to have the questions so that they apply to a larger number of schools and are not highly specific to your school only. Okay. Yeah.
Take this from me, I'll give you this. You can hold this. Oh, sorry, would you? Take it first. There you go.
My question is, will the teachers that are going to be teaching or covering the online courses, are they going to be required to have any additional requirements for BPSS in terms of being technology, savvy?
No, they will not.
Huh?
No, it doesn't seem to work. No, they will not. They will still be the regular subject matter teachers. It should be the same teacher who does the online and who does the classroom portion. So that way we have one teacher. Of course, the substitute teacher rules still apply. If your teacher is ill, another teacher can jump in, but there should be one main teacher, just in any regular classroom. There wouldn't be any additional demands on their technological knowledge from our side, because we do not have any teacher codes for that. However, we would certainly expect the school to determine that the teacher is able to handle that. However, the teacher is not the IT person for that course. When I still taught for Empire State College, I had to regularly tell my students, if your login doesn't work, there is absolutely nothing I can do about this. I'm teaching history here. I am barely able to follow with the technology myself. Here is the number of the IT department. You call them. It's called the helpline. And that is something you will have to need to create. What will your school do if a student has a problem with the technology? You will need either to farm out the technical issues. That you can, by the way. We are not requiring the schools to have a help desk. If the vendor provides a help desk, that's perfect. Because the help desk is only about the technology. It's not about the teaching. And the teaching is what your teacher has to do. The teacher does not need to necessarily help out with logging in. Thank you.
This one is a, if it is a real learning,
I
real-time
will repeat it.
learning, and I am lecturing in my classroom, and I have 30 students total. 15 of them, they are present in the class, and 15 they are sitting in their drawing room. Okay, and can they do the real-time learning, and I will know that those 15 students, they are online right now, or they are absent, or they can do on their own luxury whenever they catch my lecture?
Okay.
This situation is one that we would like to avoid. That half of your class is at home doing the online version, and half of your class is in the room if it's the same class. No, that won't work. What I'm thinking is the entire class, instead of being in the school for the medical terminology on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, actually stays at home on Monday and Wednesday, and then comes to class on Friday to apply their knowledge. That frees that classroom for 2 periods where you can do then something else. But the whole class has to be in sync. One thing also, though, that this will help with is if a student misses a class. It will be a lot easier than for a teacher to actually teach that particular section to a student. But no, the entire class as such has to be in lockstep. They stay at home the same days. They are in class the same days.
I believe that same rule will be applied if they didn't do the, as you said, the pre-homework, or and they are coming unprepared, and they missed that lecture, and they didn't
Then
attend that, and coming just for the practical, the second step.
That's when you call them out on that. They have not done the work, and therefore they lose points. And you warn them, sorry, another time that you are coming unprepared, you may flunk the class. And then, like any missed hours, they will have to make up what they didn't do. And that's why, like, for example, this course has also the control features. You will know if they took the pre-test that they are supposed to take before they appear in class. You can tell them, hey, James, I didn't see you take that 50-question test that you were supposed to take before coming this morning. What happened?
So if I could comment quickly on that, whenever you get your department together to decide what the rules are, and then you submit those for approval, you want to make sure that those parameters are in place. That's why I said, where there are no laws, there are no criminals. But if you tell them up front that you have to complete X number of pre-homework assignments and post-homework assignments, and you have to watch X number of lectures, all of those things are built into your curriculum and your instructional design so that you have parameters in place. We even have the students sign an agreement with us that they're going to do that. That they are aware of it, and they know it, and they have to do it, and they're responsible for it before they can even take the class.
Thank you. A few institutions asked me to ask this question. They weren't able to attend today's session, so let me read it to you and then see if you can understand what point I'm trying to get to. A program shall, and I believe this is the language that's found somewhere in State Education Department regulations. A program shall provide live instruction that allows immediate interaction between student and instructor. And the question goes like this. Does this mean that distance education in the state of New York for BPS schools must be synchronous because of having implied that it be live instruction? And this would certainly preclude BPS schools from having programs that are asynchronous in aspects that allow students to pursue their education at various times during a 24-hour period. So, did you understand the question?
These schools have misunderstood the word live here. The live part happens to be when they're grouped in class. I will try.
Thomas, we can't hear you.
The live part refers to the teacher and student interaction. That teacher-student interaction can happen, it happens when the students come back to the class to practice what they have learned in the pre-work. Well, actually, pre-work is perhaps not the best way of describing this, because it's not really it's done at home, but it's part of the instruction. It's part of the assignments. It doesn't really make a big difference in a technical sense if they're given before or after the live interaction. But the live interaction within the course is, for example, that Friday when they all troop together and practice with the teacher in the classroom. For a fully online course, because we have a few of them as well, notably for computers, like Microsoft prep courses and so on. There, the live part happens to be the teacher who is available by phone, if there's a question, and by email. So what the live here means is no canned course, in which the only thing you do is take automated tests, and you don't even have any phone number or email for an instructor that you could ask if you have a question. So it means the instructor has to be alive.
Can I make a suggestion? As a suggestion, we have synchronous issues as well, and what we do is we have what we call a Fuse account. It's like WebEx, and we have virtual office hours and we have virtual classroom sessions where we're mandated to meet twice a week for 1 hour with our students, and they have special features in there where they can raise their hand, and you can click on them and let them take over the screen. This technology exists to where you can actually have a synchronous session, as often as you would like.
At 10 o'clock at night?
At 10 o'clock at night, 24 hours a day. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, in the back.
You're using third-party learning management system.
I can't hear you.
Oh, you, sorry.
Not loud enough.
If you're using a third-party learning management system, would you have to back your material up on a primary server on premises, on your premises, or would it be okay to use the third party's server, even if they only have one?
We normally expect the student records to be on the premises.
Mike again.
Okay, we need donations for microphones.
I needed my exercise.
We expect student records to be on the premises. So your mirror server and your backup can be wherever you want, but the primary records have to be where your school is. Well, I mean, you have two servers, the mirror and the first one. The first one should be, the documents from the course should be backed up somewhere on a computer in your school. We need access to that. That's what. And your mirror server, that can be somewhere else. But your documents, your backup, when you archived copies and all that, that has to be at your school.
So the grades can go into an Excel spreadsheet, be on there. I think that's what's confusing.
Yeah.
And yet everything else
wanna
is
say that?
supposed to.
When it comes to the technical parts, there are more qualified people.
They just need to know that. Okay, so whenever you use, let's say you used a McGraw-Hill product and the students were keeping, well, all of their grades and all of their performance was being stored on the McGraw-Hill servers. However, you can download every single activity that they have ever done. All of their records can be downloaded, and you can keep those on your on-site server. So your on-site server would be able to keep record of attendance, it would be able to keep record of the students who were enrolled and their performance, but you wouldn't have to keep, every single piece of technology that you're seeing up here, just a performance. And I think that's what Dr. Reimer was speaking about. The most important thing is that all of that data has to be backed up, and so you would want to check with McGraw-Hill to verify that they have a backup server, which I know they do. They've gone to the cloud with Amazon servers, so it's very, very safe.
Yeah, this is exactly what we require, that the results from the course, including the ongoing courses, are available as a download at your school. Because a BPSS staffer could be coming at any time to check these things. There might be suddenly a reason or another that McGraw-Hill is not reachable, and we need to have these documents available when we need them.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. One, this is my first time here, so I don't have the 8-page criteria that you gave out last year, so how do I get a hold of that?
Terry Zaleski emailed them, and I think Justin has an emailed electronic copy that he can forward.
Okay, great. And secondly, I just want your thoughts on trying to figure out how to apply this. We have a home health aid program. That would be very difficult because of the population that undergoes that training program. One, in terms of accessibility to computers. Two, and I don't know if this is in line with what the gentleman was asking, but there is a very strict protocol in terms of the hours and the program implementation. So how would that fit? I'm sorry, Denalise looks.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, certain programs are currently, certain programs cannot be taught as a blended learning program. That would be nurse aid, that would be home health aid, that would be the 5 appearance enhancement curricula, that is actually the 6 ones of the barber, that lead to a state exam. However, like for appearance enhancement, you can't do nails technician, aesthetics, cosmetology, and waxing, and natural hair as blended learning, because we do not have Department of State approval for that. And same is true for barbering. But on the other hand, makeup, which is not under these 6 subjects, makeup technology could be taught as a blended learning curriculum. For the allied health, medical assistant comes to mind, medical office assistant comes to mind. But on the other hand, nurse aid, home health aid cannot be taught like this because of restrictions by the Department of Health. Then I would also say that phlebotomy at this point cannot be taught that way simply because of the subject matter. Now, at some point, I can see perhaps the theory part of a few skills units being taught that way, but that would require a very fine tuning of your schedules. And so at this point, I would say, let's not even walk into a phlebotomy or AKG unit with that, but let's work on those units where the subject matter really leads itself to that.
I know that you just mentioned appearance enhancement, obviously because of Department of State regulation, but what about pieces of appearance enhancement like anatomy and physiology or even safety and sanitation? What about doing something like that blended?
Currently, we do not feel we have the approval from Department of State to teach any hour in these 5 appearance enhancement curricula as blended learning or online, simply because there's a mandated number of clock hours. And once we have a blended learning program, as we discussed earlier, the actual number of hours that the student will spend on a unit will vary. So if you have, let's say, anatomy and physiology in a medical assistant curriculum, there may be 40 hours set for that, but these will be notional because only perhaps 10 or 15 will be actually in class. The others will be assignment-based, and some students might be quicker than others. Whereas with cosmetology, you have to complete 1,000 hours. And how can we certify that if some students take only half the time to complete these units and the others take twice as long? So we would run into real problems here.
Is this something that you've been discussing with Department of State, or is it not even a discussion right now?
It's not, we have kind of like mentioned it over the years, but we always feel that this is opening, it's opening a can of worms, to be honest, because of the number of hours that we need to certify.
Dr. Reimer, there are states that are doing the theoretical portion online.
Convince Amy.
I'm trying. Working on it. It's on my agenda.
Very good. I was just going to say, there are certain courses like phlebotomy where some parts can probably be taught blended, and then the actual, them coming in and doing the blood draw would be different. But can some courses be considered for like a small or partial part of it being blended, like the lecture part?
At this point, I would prefer that one unit is blended instead of half a unit being blended and the other half being in class. This is also for us something fairly new, also in terms of supervision. So we'd like to proceed with caution to make sure that there are not unexpected problems arising from this. So at this point, instead of having, let's say, an AKG unit and the first half is blended and the other one is entirely in class, we'd rather have medical terminology, A&P, medical laws and ethics, and computers in the medical office entirely as blended. That means from the beginning to the end, there's so and so many hours of work that is done at home, followed by so and so many days in the classroom, and then we'll see how we proceed from there.
Okay.
Now, one thing that you need to remember also, and I'm not that familiar with the numbers, but it is not cheap to teach online. I mean, on many colleges that went onto the online bandwagon in the early 2000s found out that it cost more money and dedicated staff than they thought it would. So you have to calculate carefully, is it worth it for you? What will you do with the empty classroom when you have a blended learning module? I mean, for you, the immediate gain is that classroom filled 5 times a week with students taking 2 hours of medical terminology. Suddenly, for those 5 times 2 hours, you suddenly have 4 times 2 hours in which that room is empty. If you do not have something else to do with that room, then it's not really, I think, a financial advantage to you to have blended learning. The main advantage for schools is space. You gain space. And I know in Manhattan, that's the last frontier.
Other questions?
Personal training?
Potentially.
In terms of just the course in general, could you offer the same course two ways? One, you take it all in person, and the second option of that would be the hybrid version of, like a part-time version would be hybrid.
Certainly, you could do that. You would then send in the blended one as a new course, but give me a cover letter explaining this is actually the old course, just now as blended learning. I would then have to check the online part. I always check these. I actually go through them like a student would, and then it would be approved. It would receive a different curriculum number. And for courses such as your continuing education courses, continuing education courses would be a great way to start this and become familiar with the technique. But yes, you can certainly have two models, like they are not a large number, but there are a few schools who have, let's say, a Microsoft class, both classroom and online versions.
Hi, Dr. Reimer. For electrical theory, understanding the code where it's just theory or just code with the code book, there's no practical at all, would that be considered also in that areas?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Is that the answer?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, good. Before I walk up there, anybody else?
I mean, the more skills a particular unit has, the more difficult this will be. Although, once we are all more familiar with this method of teaching, I can see a AKG or phlebotomy that's half-half, but not in the beginning. It's a pilot for us too. We need to make sure that all the field associates are familiar with it, know what to look for. If a student complains, there are some refund issues that need to be solved, like what refund policy. I mean, if it was purely online or a purely online unit within a curriculum, then the refund is easy. That's the pro rata. With a blended, we need to kind of like think about that. Another thing that came up with a couple of schools, if you have to pay for access to a learning delivery system, and it's even worse if it's your own and proprietary, there is an issue if you are going to charge the students a separate technology fee, especially if it's substantial. We consider that access to the course is paid through the tuition. And if it's an online course or a blended course, then it includes the online parts as well. There should be no separate technology fee because the school can only charge for services that they deliver. So that's the teaching, which is the tuition. That's the books. But remember, the books and equipment are things that the students keep. Even if they drop, they keep these books. You can have the books in PDF. That's not an issue. You just have to tell us that they are in PDF. But they have to be in a format that the student keeps if they graduate and if they drop. Not a subscription that ends when the student finishes school. And with the technology fee, that should be included in the tuition because it's not something that the student will keep if they graduate and if they drop. It's like the rent you pay for your building. That's not, some school many years ago tried to have the enrollment agreement broken down into tuition, very little, books was quite pricey, and then building maintenance fee, meaning their rental. And we said, well, you are right. Your rent is not technically what you pay to your teacher, but still access to the course, which means access to the classroom, that's part of the tuition. And that's also true if the classroom happens to be online. And I'm only saying this because we are right now battling two schools about that.
Any more questions?
Any final words?
I would. One thing that Dr. Reimer mentioned was it's hard to tell how long an assignment is going to be completed on these types of activities online, but we've had over 1 billion probes answered now, and we have very accurate data for the average time, which will be helpful. I'm not saying it's the gold standard, but you can actually slide the bar to assign 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, however much time you want, and there is data behind it to be able to support that. So whenever you're looking for activities that you have to prove evidence or provide evidence for, that it takes the average student this amount of time, you know, it's a little better way of you know, gauging how much time it would take those students to do it. Number two, and I'll end with this, is that one of the great things about building hybrid courses is collaboration. And you can get collaboration from those like myself who have done it before, and even from vendors who have done it before. They can kind of give you a guide as an outline, provide support, instructional design support that was based on guys like me who are subject matter experts and digital experts. So don't be afraid to ask for that kind of help. You're not alone. You don't have to do it by yourself.
And with that, I'd like to pay special thank you to Dr. Hoover and to Dr. Reimer. And once again, special thank you to McGraw-Hill Higher Education for helping to make this possible. We really appreciate that. And almost 2:45, which means it's going to be ice cream and cookie reception time. Back there, going to eat some more and have some great fun. These guys will be around, so you'll be able to talk to them some more too. Remember that at 3:45, we start with 2 concurrent sessions, one in this room, one across the hall, one that's about improving your school's placement rate and students' debt-to-earning ratio, and the other about compliance with the Campus Security Clery Act, and a lot of stuff relating to that. And then we follow up with another batch of sessions later in the afternoon about reinventing your school brand, and then best practices in course materials. So we've got a nice afternoon still ahead of us. Enjoy the ice cream. Remember, 3:30 back down here. So, got 45 minutes. Enjoy. The guys are up there ready to scoop away.